Hello and welcome back to the Rugby Paper podcast. As the Premiership season has drawn to a close, today we're taking the opportunity to look back on the career of one of Bath's greatest ever fullbacks. Nick Abendanon joins the columnists and myself, and we also pay tribute to the Rugby Paper's founder and editor-in-chief David Emery, who very tragically passed at the weekend. The pace of the season has relented somewhat on the field, at least. Off the field, there's obviously still plenty to discuss. Premiership season's ended, and I thought we'd take this week to look back on the career of someone who announced their retirement from their stellar rugby career a couple of months ago now. It's legendary Bath fullback Nick Abendanon, 17-year career done and dusted, and he joins us today. Where are you right now, Nick?
I'm actually down in at my parents-in-law's house in Portsmouth.
Okay, for how long?
Yeah. Until Sunday night, then we go back to France.
Is this just a little pop over to the UK to see some loved ones?
We came over for a friend of my wife's wedding, which was nice. So we left our two eldest children with my parents in France, and they're coming back on the ferry tonight. And we've just had a third little baby who we gave to my mother-in-law, and so we had an evening free of children, which was nice for me and my wife. And then we've got the 80th birthday of my father-in-law on Saturday, and then we leave on Sunday.
My God, it's all going on. So retirement's not exactly quiet then.
It's definitely not been how I imagined it in my head 2 or 3 months ago. Because 2 or 3 months ago, I was going to completely stop playing. I was going to take a year off just to, spend time with the family, try and get my golf handicap as low as possible, and enjoy a bit of the Brittany sunshine and coastline. And within the space of a week, I had accepted an offer at Bayonne to go and do some coaching there. We've just finished a renovation in Van on a house, so we moved out of our rental place a week ago into a house that's not finished, and then we can have to move from there in 2 weeks' time down to Bayonne. So it's all that with the little 7-week-old baby has not been easy.
Yeah, wow. So I'm guessing no golf whatsoever is being played then. That will have to be a long-term project.
Well, luckily enough, I've managed to squeeze a little round in with a mate in West Hill tomorrow night. So I'm gonna enjoy that. But I've not played any golf for about a year, which has been very depressing.
You could have spent your year off, Nick, doing a bit of sprint training in an attempt to get as fast as Matt Perry.
That is true. I think Matt's probably faster, not at the sprint training, at chopping pints than he is at running fast these days. But yeah, it's one guy who I always try and catch up with when I go back to Bath. He's great value.
Yeah, he'd be pretty quick if there was a bar at the end of the 100 meters, wouldn't he? Yeah.
Exactly.
A bar rather than the tape, and Perry wins hands down.
So when you retired, was it always going to be, irrespective of the Bayonne offer, obviously, congratulations on that. Were you going to stay in France regardless?
I was going to stay in France, yeah. We've loved our time over in France over the last 8 years. We've had 3 kids over in France, and we want to stay in France for as long as possible, so that all the kids are bilingual. And then, at some point we'll make our way back to England, but not sure when.
Yeah. How's your French?
Yeah, French is good now. I've managed to crack it, and it took me a good four years to be able to. From year 1 to 4, I was fighting demons and was saying I'm never ever going to be able to learn this language, but. Yeah, it's funny. It just sort of comes to you at some stage, and it just clicks into place. And now, no problems.
Correct it. Well, I guess you'll get to the point as well where, I don't know, maybe you're at this point, your children will overtake you in their French ability, just because obviously the earlier you start learning, the better you become at the language, right?
Oh yeah, I mean that's already happening at the moment. My 7-year-old daughter is constantly correcting our French, which is a little embarrassing. But it's also nice as well at the same time when you have to, come up with a word that you've never heard before, and she knows it, and she helps you out a little bit. So yeah, that's pretty. My parents are Dutch, and they both speak fluent Dutch, but they never could be bothered to speak it to us when we were kids, and I've always held a grudge against them for that. I think giving your children another language from a young age is a very important gift if you're able, and so hopefully they can use that now to become little linguists. We're going to try and get them to Spanish next, and yeah, I think it's a very useful tool to have for the future.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I'm a languages student at university, so I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree. But that's a conversation for another day. Let's just focus on the retirement decision itself. Now, there was a retirement sort of illusion 2 years ago, and then or 3 years ago now. Sorry, God, time flies. You turned on that. Talk about, first of all, that U-turn, and then why you felt that, I know it was related to a bicep injury, why you felt it was actually time this time to call it a day.
Well, yeah, I mean, when I finished at Clermont, I still had a +1 on the contract. So ideally, I was hoping that they were gonna allow me to do that +1, and then I was going to retire after that. At the time, I didn't watch any Pro D2 rugby. Didn't really know anything about the competition. It's funny, when you're in the top 14, that's all you watch. And now I've been in the Pro D2 for the last 3 years, that's all I watch. I don't really follow much top 14 rugby. So yeah, I was hoping to get that +1, but they never gave it to me. So then COVID hit, and suddenly I was in a position where I was almost forced into retirement, even knowing that I still had a lot of rugby left in me. Clubs just weren't offering any contracts to players, and there was so much uncertainty around what was going to happen that I found myself in a position where I had 2 offers from clubs back in England, London Irish and Leicester, and I had the only offer I had from France was from Van. And we decided to keep the French adventure going, and I'm pretty thankful for them that they gave me the chance to continue to play.
I guess staying in France in Pro D2 is testament to the fact that your decision to go to France was absolutely a good one. I know you've gone on the record saying it was the best in your career. Is that still how you look at it now?
Yeah, 100%. I think all the experiences that I have, obviously I've been very, very fortunate in the fact that I was involved in a fantastic Clermont side that competed every single year for semi-finals. They were played in all the big games, so that makes it a lot more enjoyable. It's the reason we play, is to play in those sort of games. But even coming down to the Pro D2 and playing for Van, it gave me a bit of a new lease of life. The guys here, they're all very good players, but they just haven't had their chance to sort of prove that they can play in the top 14. They're all very grounded, work really hard, and I think that the Pro D2 competition is outstanding. It's it's a very, very tough, physical but enjoyable competition, and without a shadow of a doubt, the 8 years in France have definitely eclipsed anything that I experienced in England.
Nick, take us into that wonderful, mad world of Clermont and Stade Michelin. I mean, it's always been a favourite trip for us British journos, and I remember going there when they were actually Clermont-Ferrand, and they used to have a big tent at one end with the bar in, and all the players used to serve behind the bar for the first hour after the match, and you just got the impression of a fantastic rugby community even then. And they weren't a great team then, but they were a great club. And what did you make of it when you parachuted into that place?
I was, I think, I mean, I got sent, obviously, that you're going to ask some questions at the end of, short 5 questions. But, when you say, like, what's your favourite stadium? Like, not being biased or anything, I've played in a lot of the very, very good stadiums, but the Marsan Michelin it's something like I've never experienced before, when especially on some of the earlier in the first year I was there, 14-15, in some of the Champions Cup games. It's just it's a colossal experience of Those sort of every single time you run out and you're getting those tingly butterfly feelings, and you're sort of having to pinch yourself that you're actually involved in a team this big and this much loved by the supporters. I mean, obviously there's lots of other teams that have great supporters, but there was something special about the Clermont supporters, that they just lived and died for the team. They just did anything out of their way to make sure that we were loved, and the experiences there were. It was difficult at the start because I don't think anyone in Clermont knew who I was when I came from Bath. So I needed to work bloody hard to prove myself, and I sort of knew that the first judge, they're going to all judge you on your performances on the pitch first of all. So I didn't take an off season. I trained as hard as I could to get in the best shape possible, and thankfully that paid off, because as soon as you're an international and you come and your performances on the pitch are good, they accept you with open arms. And I really became close with a lot of the supporters there, and it was like having a huge family around me for those 6 years.
And anything special behind the scenes, Monday to Friday training that was markedly different from Bath times?
Well, I mean, we did a lot of sort of open training sessions where it would be like a captain's run, or the afternoon session on a Thursday before a big game, and so they'd open up the Marcel Michelin. We'd do it on the pitch there, and I mean, you're getting 4,000 people coming and watching you train, which is mental, really. I mean, you wouldn't. I don't think that you might get a man and his dog at the rec, but he wouldn't be there watching the rugby. He's just walking his dog on the recreation ground. So I mean, even that, like, you can see how influential the players are in terms of being role models for the kids, and how mad they all go, and it's just a different kettle of fish, really, out here.
You've been in, obviously, in the fires of Clermont rugby. You're about to go into another rugby environment, which is very particular to itself, the Basque rugby environment, where passions are pretty high and the temperatures can be quite hot. And you've also been up in Brittany, which has sort of broadly been a non-rugby area for however long, but it's a big part of France for rugby to capture eventually. So those of us who are looking at a dwindling Premiership over here, are we right to be as envious of the French scene as some of us are, with its 4 professional leagues and its extraordinarily committed support and the big TV deal and everything else that's going on over there? Because you're going in the opposite direction, on the face of it, to a lot of other rugby environments around the world.
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on with that. I mean, it's so mad to me to have been involved with this van team. When I first came to Van, they had these porta cabins and these tents that they put up as a gym, and it had the proper sort of amateur feel about it, of training in the dungeons that we used to back in the day. Even the first year that I came to Clermont, their whole training facility was underneath the left stand as you come out the tunnel.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And that was a proper old school gym, where it's sort of you can imagine the stories. If the walls could tell stories, they would be there for years. But and then last year, Van have built this training centre, which we moved into this season, and it's just the most unbelievable facility I've ever seen. It's, in terms of comparing it to the Clermont one was outstanding, but I think the Van one has surpassed the Clermont one, and I can't understand in my mind how a Pro League team is getting that sort of type of investment to be able to build that sort of infrastructure, when, as you say, in England you're having these huge clubs like Wasps London Irish, Worcester just ceasing to exist. And so yeah, obviously there's a lot of controversial characters at the top of the French FFR, but all sort of joking aside, Bernard Laporte has done a fantastic job in putting in the foundations into the French grassroots level so that they can get to where they are now with sustainability and with a lot of interest from television and stuff like that to keep investment coming into the game. And you can see that it's just worlds apart. It's every single game in the Pro D2 is televised. You've got constant support. I mean, we're selling out the Rabin every week in Brittany, which is very, very new to rugby, with 11,000 people. And yeah, I just can't imagine that's happening in the Championship in the UK. So there's definitely things that the RFU need to look at and how they can improve. But yeah, it's a difficult scenario, really.
And would it be stretching a point, Nick, just on this subject? Would it be stretching a point to say that if and this is a long-term project, but if Van get it right in terms of their marketing and their involvement of a big non-rugby audience, which becomes more rugbyfied, if you like, as their success grows, is the idea at Van to be a sort of another La Rochelle, where you just it's another West Coast side? Is there the potential there to? I mean, you came pretty close to top 14 promotion anyway this year, but
yeah, they're sitting on a pot of gold there because they're the only professional team in Brittany who have potential to make that step up to the top 14. They've got the infrastructure in place. They've got the president and the vice president who are willing to put in the money to create a squad that's going to compete to get to the top 14. And as you said, 2 years ago when we lost to Biarritz in the semi-final, we should never have lost that game. We lost in the last, in the 83rd minute to a try in the last seconds. And then this year, even though Oyonnax deserved to go up, we were in a position where we could have won that game in the semi-final there at Oyonnax. And they've got a solid base of supporters, and if you've got that, then you're onto a winner. And people travel from North Brittany, West Brittany to come and watch Van play, and it's getting bigger and bigger. The more success the team has, the more people are interested in doing it. They've got businesses who are itching to become sponsors of the club now. And so, yeah, it's definitely a bright future for Van. I think if they can get a couple of things right, then I wouldn't be surprised in 3-4 years if you'll see them in the top 14.
So, Nick, just to go back to the state-of-the-art training centre, where did the money come from?
Well, as with a lot of clubs in France, they won't be able to do much, as we found with Biarritz, unless they've got the mairie on their side. Yeah. So the town of Van, the mairie of Van, is a huge advocate of trying to grow the club and grow Van as a sporting entity. So I mean, they are the primary giver of donations and money to the club. So they built the synthetic pitch that we train on during the winter sometimes. They've just redone the one of the stands in the Rabin. So now we've increased the potential spectator count to, I think it was before at 9,000, now at 11,500. And yeah, so with their backing, they obviously then put in money to the training facility as well. And the main sponsor, Dosi, it's a big alimentaire company. It's called Dosi Park, and they have been sort of the main big company that's put in money.
So is it almost as if it's a community hub as well then?
Yeah, 100%. I think the mayor of Van luckily is a big rugby fan. If it wasn't the case, maybe they wouldn't get the funding that they have been able to get. But his vision is that if you create something that the community can get involved in, and they can, I mean, the positioning of the Rabin is like the Rec. There's not many stadiums that are positioned that centrally in a town. So I mean, you've got a beautiful port in Van. You walk across the road, 500 meters, and you're at the stadium. So it's very much on a Friday night. Everything is revolved around coming down to the port, enjoying some drinks, going out for dinner, being with your friends, going to watch the game, and they've created this sort of Friday night atmosphere that gets the whole town involved, and people absolutely love it.
And it must be very valuable, actually, for Pro D2 to have its own, in terms of broadcasting and fixture scheduling, what have you, pretty much to have its own space. I know the top 14 occasionally play a game on a Friday, but it's very occasional, isn't it? I mean, that's Pro D2 territory, that Friday night, and the game on a Thursday night. So it's treated as equal almost in terms of its scheduling.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's great. I mean, pretty top 14 very, very rarely play on a Friday night, and then you get the big game on a Thursday night, and then all the other games played on a Friday. So it's great that they've got that slot that they can own, and they can then taper it to their specific needs that they want to try and push across. And so far, it's worked tremendously well.
So, Nick, you'll still have a lot of former playing buddies and so on still playing in the Premiership, I'm sure. And I'm very interested to know what you make of what's going on this side of the channel in terms of the Premiership. You've mentioned, obviously, the 3 clubs going bust. But where's it gone wrong, do you think? What is the what are the issues that you really detect? I mean, some people would say that the game has been living beyond its means because it doesn't have the means that, in terms of either broadcast revenue or sponsorship revenue or the support of local municipalities as it does in France. But do you think that it is really a question of it living beyond its means and actually not being very well organised either?
Yeah, I must say, from the outside, outside looking in, I'm extremely worried about the state of affairs of English rugby at the moment. There's a lot of negative press around not just sort of the clubs, but the game itself. There's a lot of press at the moment with regards to this head knocks and injuries, and so as a result, participating numbers have completely dropped down, and now you're seeing 3 massive clubs go bust. That's setting a sort of shockwave through all the other clubs as to how are they gonna, how are they not gonna find themselves in the same situation. And so the problem is that players have such short careers that they want to try and maximize their potential, maximize their earnings as quickly and as fast as they can, but some of the contracts that players are getting, I don't think are sustainable in terms of clubs and being able to continue down that road. So there's definitely something that needs to be done. I know obviously the Welsh clubs have taken the first step into implementing what they believe is going to fix their situation financially. But yeah, everything to me at the moment just seems like it's a fight against each other.
Is there much coverage of it in France, or doesn't it get much of a mention?
When big, the big clubs folded, and there was obviously a lot of press around it there. But they, do like to compare it to the success of the French and say, well, the English are struggling, but the French, look at us, we're amazing. We look at our numbers are growing, our numbers are increasing with even at youth level, the numbers are increasing, the spectators are increasing, the TV rights are increasing. So yeah, they've obviously got it right. At the end of the day, it comes down to the spectacle, really, doesn't it? And are spectators in England getting their money's worth from a game of Premiership rugby? Is it interesting enough? Is it entertaining enough? And when I watch a Premiership game at the moment, to me, it's not that entertaining. I mean, in France, if you come to a game in France, just the match day spectacle is so much more alive, entertaining, vibrant. You've got the bands playing, you've got music constantly, you've got people jumping up and down in the stands. The whole experience is so much more energetic, whereas I don't know whether it's just the type of human English people are. They're maybe a little bit more reserved or sort of intrinsic, but they're not. The match day experience just isn't as alive as what you experience here.
How have the French seemed to? I mean, I speak from a position of ignorance. I don't speak French for a start, but it seems to me that somehow the French clubs, at French club rugby, has captured a spirit of deep community identity and deep community expressions of deep community pride, which are only really mirrored in England, apart from one or two isolated areas. I mean, the Southwest, obviously, without big Premiership football, is a rugby area. Insofar as there is a rugby area in England, that's it. There's a pocket in the East Midlands of Northampton and Leicester. Leicester is a bit of an outlier because it has teams all over the place in variety of sports. But it doesn't seem that the community identity has grown or taken root in England in the professional game in the way it has in France. Do you detect any truth in that rambling nonsense at all, or was that just rambling nonsense?
No, I think
the second.
Most of it was rambling nonsense, but you said there is some sense. There is some sense to what you're trying to say. I actually think that ever since the game has become professional, that sort of that community, that deep ingrained sort of community feel has completely drifted away. If you think about back in the days where it was Bath, Bristol, Gloucester, like in the early days, just on the limit when it did start becoming professional, you played for your one club and that was it. And that's when you did have that really strong community feel. But now there's players come and go, and I think that sort of that's disappeared quite a lot. Whereas in France, even though they probably get a lot more turnover of players, that the actual supporters in that area are so fiercely supportive of their team that they've just got that base that makes it all so much more successful.
Yeah. And also, I mean, we know of course that certain French clubs have had their own Worcester style financial issues, not as terminal as those appear to be, but we've seen what happened in Biarritz, and they've had a whole bag of problems for some years now. We saw what happened to Bourgoin. We've seen big clubs like Dax go plummeting down through the leagues and now bouncing back up.
And Grenoble today, Chris, they've just been relegated. They were in the playoffs, weren't they? And they've been relegated to National 1 because of financial irregularities.
They can't show that their sons had that. The French game just seems to be able to absorb those financial blows in a way that English club rugby is struggling to do. I mean, it's just shedding teams at the moment. It's not as though there's anything underneath that can replace them.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean that as well. But you look at sort of if you're an investor looking at buying, say, Wasp, for instance, what is attracting you to buy that club? There's not a huge amount. You're taking on a shitload of debt. You don't own your stadium. You don't have the local sort of governments backing you, and so as an investor, it's not a very attractive investment. Whereas in France, you've already got the infrastructure in place where you're going to get the TV rights. You're going to get, most of the clubs have got a good, solid foundation of support already put in place. And so a new investor, for me, will always come in and take over a club in France because the potential is there to be able to grow it and to be able to create something behind it. Whereas I just don't see that sort of potential in any of the clubs that have gone down in the Premiership at the moment. It's just too risky.
And Nick, I think a part of that as well is the fact that even though Chris and Brent are right about the clubs who've gone bust in France, or not bust, but have been relegated or whatever because of financial irregularities or whatever, the regulation there is much, much stricter. So they get in earlier, and the club will be relegated, and then it will learn its lesson, hopefully, and then it will bounce back. And as you say, an investor will sort of look at it and think, yes, this is viable.
Yeah.
Nick, do you think that the state of the Premiership at the moment, obviously, when you were in your early seasons at Clermont, there were calls for you or Stefan Armitage or whatever to be allowed to play for England despite the law that was in place. Do you think the current state of the English Premiership is all the more reason for players to be allowed to play in France, or rather the opposite, in that you mentioned that the Premiership as a spectacle isn't great to watch? I guess allowing players to then go abroad, which they inevitably would do, would probably diminish that spectacle even more. So is that all the more reason to keep them in the country as well?
Yeah, in my opinion, I never really held any grudges against Stuart Lancaster when he didn't choose to select me and Stefan. Before we decided to go over to France, we knew the rules. I think it probably would have been a good thing if he had maybe brought us into the training squad, because that would have helped with competition and pushing the guys a little bit more. But I definitely don't think that they should be opening up the rule book and changing things to allow players to go out and play in France. I just think that's going to be detrimental for the English game. It's going to be detrimental for the international team. As a player, you've got to weigh up what's important in your life. Is it to play for England? Is it to experience new cultures, experience new things? Is it to stay closer to your family? Those are all the questions that players currently have got to ask themselves. But I definitely, if I was involved in the RFU, would not be allowing players to play in France but still play for England.
It's interesting, though, that with the regulations that the French have got about the number of French players that they've got to have in each club side, I just wonder actually how big the market would be for England players. You might say that maybe you'd lose 10, possibly 15, but more than that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good point. The GIF rule that they've implemented in France, I think it's now 17. Next season, it's going to be 17 GIF players in a matchday squad. So, I mean, the market for international players in general is bloody tough to crack. There's lots and lots of very, very good players trying to come to France and get into a French club, but it's impossible. I mean, French clubs do obviously love to get big name players from New Zealand and South Africa and Australia over,
and your Fijian wings.
Well, and your Fijian wingers, exactly. You probably pick them up a bit cheaper.
And your Georgian props.
Yeah, you can pick them up a bit cheaper though. But yeah, so I mean, there's not many spaces for English guys. So if you do get a chance to do it, I would say, take it with open arms, because it's not as if you're going to get it later on in your career. If that's what you want to do and you want to go over to France, then yeah, snap it up whilst you can, because I don't think if it doesn't happen this time, it won't happen later.
There's every chance of the two Willis brothers playing against each other in the top 14 final as we stand at the moment. That's difficult to turn down. I mean, and who would have believed that 9 months ago when we started the season with Voss?
Yeah, that's a good point. But I mean, he's made his decision. If I was in his position, I would probably have made the same decision. You're playing for, if not the best team in France, with the players that they've got in that team. It's tough to it's tough to turn down a contract. Like, go back to a team in England where he's basically, relying on playing for England each year. And I mean, I think he's made the right decision.
I'd sort of argue also that it's pretty tough in many respects for the RFU and the Premiership, having sort of made such a balls up of the English game, that players like Willis, Jack Willis, find themselves having to go to Toulouse, and that they then, having sort of created a wasteland in England of the competitive structure, then say to a player, right, you go over there to make a living because the club that you played for is bust, but you're not playing for England,
Yeah, I mean, his case is obviously a very particular case. But yeah, I mean, it's difficult, really. I do think that the RFU need to explore these central contracts. It will give them a lot more control over their top players, and it will make it financially easier for a player to be able to turn down some of the lucrative deals that they're getting offered in France. The RFU still is one of the most profitable unions in.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. No.
Nick, just one more question on that, if I can, very briefly. I'm interested by the fact that you say that if players were allowed to go to France, then it would negatively impact the English game. I'm guessing by that you mean domestic English game. Do you also mean for the national side as well? Because, well, I'm being presumptuous here, but I would probably say you would feel you're a better player having played in France as well as having played in England.
Yeah, I definitely said. Well, I definitely became a better player having come out to France. But I'll give you an example. Is that the first year the year that I came over to Clermont in 14-15, Jonathan Davies also signed at the same time. Now, he was essentially contracted with the Welsh Rugby Union, but there was always like conflicts between letting him go during weeks that he shouldn't have, like whether he's going to come back on a Wednesday and play for Clermont on a Saturday and then go back to Wales the next week because Wales had a break during the Six Nations. And it was always just such it was like a draining sort of conversation, draining process the whole time. And the problem is that if you allow players to do that, then the RFU just don't have control over their players. The French clubs obviously paying them a huge amount of money. They want them to play for their team on a Saturday, and so conflict wise, it's just doesn't make sense.
What do you expect to find in Bayonne, Nick? Do you? I mean, you'd have had some experience of Basque rugby. I mean, those of us who've watched a bit of YouTube still treasure the memory of the great Imanal Aranordaki getting in a huge, great fight in a Basque derby, and a bloke running on from the crowd to help out, and it turned out to be his dad. It is a particular flavour, isn't it? Basque rugby.
It is. I mean, in terms of you talk about those having an identity as a team, and it doesn't get stronger than down there in the southwest. That is proper rugby country. I don't think you find many football clubs in and around the Basque Country. I've been lucky enough to play against both, Biarritz. We played against them in the Heineken Cup. So played against the likes of Harry Nordique and stuff. So played there at their stadium. Played at Bayonne as well. So experienced that as well. But I think ever since they've had that little bit of success coming up from the Pro D2 last year, and now having been as successful as they have been this year in terms of their before I was down there for the interview phase of getting the job, and their goal for the season was just to stay up into the top 14. So the fact that they almost pushed for a playoff spot and they've now got Champions Cup is a huge thing for them. And every game that I've managed to watch this year, you see that every single game this season has been sold out. They've got the whole town behind them. The Basque singing. That's what I mean about that sort of whole spectacle of match day experience. It's just that gets your endorphins going, and so I'm very, very excited to get down there and get stuck into it and experience that firsthand. I'm apprehensive at the same time, a bit scared because it's obviously a completely new environment going into coaching. I've not, obviously as a player you do a lot of analysis as it is, but not so much hands-on coaching with players. I'm going to be coaching players that I've played with in the past as well. So it's going to be interesting trying to keep those relationships going without getting too close to the players. You've got to keep that professional sort of distance as well. So it's going to be an interesting period, but I'm very much looking forward to it.
Were you still at Bath, Nick, when they played Biarritz in the Heineken semi-final or the Champions Cup semi-final round the corner in San Sebastian, or had you already gone?
No, I actually travelled that day with the team. I was 24th man when we just lost that game. But that was pretty amazing. They this year they unfortunately Bayonne lost to Po in that game that they played in that stadium this year. But that was a great memory that I had from a young age, sort of getting to experience that.
Yeah, I remember David Flatman saying that Biarritz weren't really that good. Harry Nordique could play a bit at number 8, and they were pretty tough up front. But he said there's nothing there apart from that bloody number 9 Yashvili, who just won games on his own. I mean, you're a really skillful, intuitive kind of player. He was weird, wasn't he? I mean, he didn't have any legs. He had like 2 matchsticks and could kick the ball miles. He was a true original, I think.
Yeah, he was. He's always, when you talk about Biarritz's glory days, him and Harry Nordique are right to the top of that list, and I think he's still pretty heavily involved in things down there.
Nick, we've got about 15 minutes before I know you need to go. I'd like to sort of tap into a few more memories from your rugby career, if I can. First of all, through the Random Rugby 15, which is the 15 quickfire question section, if that's okay with you. Yeah. Awesome. Let's get going with that then. Nickname.
My nickname, in England it was Bendy.
Mm-hmm.
In France, funny enough, it was ta mère.
Pourquoi?
because they say Nick ta mère. Is it?
Nice. Wow.
That surprisingly was something that stuck. Funny enough, throughout the whole time I was at Clermont, I would come in and say, "Ça va ta mère?"
Ça va ta mère. That's so funny. Best rugby memory.
My best rugby memory's got to be I always say winning the top 14 with Clermont in 2017, but my other best rugby memory was back in the schoolboy days of Cheltenham College when we won Rosslyn Park Sevens against Wellington. We beat they had a star-studded outfit of Haskell, Tom Evans, and we were sort of the Mighty Ducks, and we managed to beat them. So that was a fantastic memory as well.
Why would anyone take any pleasure in beating James Haskell? I can't work it out.
Most embarrassing rugby memory.
Most embarrassing rugby memory. Probably something happened fairly recently. 2 years ago, we lost the semi-final to Brits. It's a good life lesson as well, as not to gloat, because with 5 minutes left, we were like 12 points up or something like that, and I started mouthing off a bit to a few of the Brits players, saying "Have fun in the Pro D next year," and they went on and won it. And that same player ran straight up to me before any of his teammates and let me know that and that was pretty embarrassing, to be honest.
I'm going to be a bit cheeky here and sort of, when I read that question and I knew obviously you'd be answering, the day that you got Tuolangi'd would pop to mind. And I wouldn't call it an embarrassing rugby memory because, well, I think the conclusion came like, bloody hell, this guy can take a few hits. How do you look back on that day?
It's funny. I'm probably better known for that YouTube compilation
like 2 million
than I am for anything that I've done on the pitch that's been good. So yeah, I mean that was a day that at the time I was wanted to forget rather rapidly. But looking back on it, those are the things that you're going to love to show your kids and your grandkids when you get older, and say that even if you get knocked down, then you get back up and you go again. And that's what I tried to do that day.
Who hits harder, Manu or Alessana?
They both hit like girls.
Pre-game tune.
Probably Henry, actually.
Yeah, he hit you. He got you at one point in another game.
He got me a few times.
Yeah. Pre-game tune.
Pre-game tune, AC/DC. Back to Black.
Nice. Post-game meal.
Post-game meal. I always loved, after a few hard battles against Gloucester at the Rec, our chef, Jerry Quinn, he used to do a fantastic lamb shank. So yeah, that was the post meal was a nice lamb shank. It's up there.
Yes. Best player you've played against?
Best player I've played against. That's difficult. Probably Dupont.
Best player you've played with?
Best player I played with is Isia Tuiava.
Nice. Favorite player right now?
I like Freddie Stewart. Intermac as well. I like.
Rugby idol?
Christian Cullen.
Nice. Favorite stadium?
Marcel Michelin.
Favorite gym exercise?
Favorite gym exercise is probably curl and press.
Oh, nice.
Oh,
very gym bro exercise.
Brendan's now pretending he knows what that is.
Yeah, exactly.
I've heard rumours of it.
Killed 2 birds with 1 stone.
Occupation if rugby didn't exist?
Golf caddy.
Caddy, not player.
Yeah, not good enough to be a player.
Which player would you like to caddy for?
Oh, Skelton.
Nice. As an aside, I'm guessing you've all seen the Liv PGA merger today that came out. That was a bit of a shock.
I didn't see that actually. I actually had a message from Laurie Cantor, who's obviously Bath-based players playing on the Liv tour, and he invited me out to one of the Liv competitions in July. But no, I didn't see that actually.
Yeah, they've well, I haven't read about it extensively, but it seems like they've merged completely. Which
the Saudis have bought golf basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is sort
Greg
of-
Norman's now the richest man in the world.
Oh,
It's unusual for golf to go where the money is, isn't it?
It is. It's absolutely
I
unprecedented.
was flabbergasted to read the whole thing.
I'm sure Sky will play some soothing music in the background now, just to ease the pain.
God, it's going to be very, very interesting. So 3 more questions. Superstitions, Nick.
Superstitions. I always wear the same boxer shorts for each game.
Is that why no one ever got? Is that why no one ever got near you?
Is that the same pair of box shorts for 17 years?
Oof. No, it has changed a couple of times.
Rugby law, you would change.
I would allow the fullback to call for a fair catch for up and under in the 22.
What does that mean? As in, just you're not allowed to compete?
As in, you're not allowed to compete. That would take away the horrendous tactic of any French team putting up box kicks and bombs on the opposition 22-meter line or 40-meter line.
This isn't a personally motivated law change at all, though. This is all like fair game for everyone, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And lastly, best thing about working in rugby?
Best thing about working rugby is probably the places that I've managed to visit throughout my career. Being able to travel around the world and play and do something that you are very passionate about is tough. I've been very thankful to do something that I'm passionate about, and having traveled around the world doing it at the same time is that's probably the best thing about it.
That's a great answer. Great answer. Awesome. That was really good, Nick. Thank you for doing that. We've got about
Nick's going to be in trouble with Ollie Barkley, though. You realise, don't you? Because when Ollie was on and was asked the best player he ever played with, without hesitation, he said Nick Abendanon.
No way.
And he didn't even give him a mention, mate.
You're the best kicker that I've ever
No,
played.
he said you were the best player.
probably
He's the best
would have said
kicker.
Ollie
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go, Nick.
He'd be
You've got
gutted.
a new most embarrassing rugby memory, forgetting Ollie Barkley.
Have you had any of Ollie Barkley's newly marketed rum yet, Nick?
I actually haven't. No, I did see it though, and I did one of those sly sort of comments saying, "Oh, this looks nice," hoping that he might send me a bottle, but he still hasn't. So maybe this won't help that I didn't mention him in.
Exactly. You're definitely not getting a bottle now. I'll try and edit this favorably and send it to him so that he gets to it. 5 minutes ish left now. Nick, I wanted to ask you a couple of things. One was the Rugby Paper published a few months ago your views around the Finn Russell to Bath transfer, and I just wanted to hear it from you in person. Obviously, on paper, one of the best, if not the form 10 in the world at the moment. You said you weren't sure it's a great signing. Just outline your hesitancies there.
Well, my hesitancies, they've probably changed a little bit since I did that article, because from the looks of things, sort of towards the back end of the season, look like they are making good progress in the right direction under the new coach. So I think him going in there, having had that success at the end of the season and taking it into next season will be very beneficial. My hesitancies simply are the fact that his game revolves around speed of ball, space, spatial awareness, and instinct, really. And I've played at the Rec for 10 years, and it can be one of the worst pitches you'll ever have the pleasure of playing against, from about November through to the end of March, sometimes even in April. So whether he's going to be able to use that rugby talent of his in the way that he likes, I don't know. The coach there has got sort of that South African style of play to his name, with a lot of pressure game, kicking, and so I hope that he's going to be used to his abilities, and he's not going to be changed into sort of your typical South African fly half. The other thing is, I just think it's a ludicrous amount of money to pay one player in a time where you got clubs sort of folding left, right, and centre. I think that's an obscene amount of money to pay one player. At least if you pay that amount of money to a player in France, you're sort of covered by the fact that if they do get injured, you get a certain amount of their contract paid for by the government, because they go on something called arrêt de travail, because they got injured in the workplace, and so the government then takes on a big proportion of that contract. Whereas in England, it's a huge risk to pay someone that amount of money. He does a knee injury in the first week, and you got to continue then paying his contract for the whole of the duration of. So I just think that as much as I absolutely love him, he's one of my favourite players to watch, and he seems like a hell of a guy as well. So I hope he does do really well, because I'd love to see Bath back up in the top echelons of English rugby. But to me personally, I just think that it's a bit of a risky signing.
It happened with Dan Carter, didn't it? When he went to Perpignan,
Exactly.
he busted himself in, I don't know, first half of the first game, was it? And that
Exactly.
was it. I cannot believe that you are suggesting for a second that the surface at the recreation ground, which is otherwise known as the River Avon, as you know, is in any way inferior to that dump of a place in Paris where Russell has been playing for the last couple of years.
Yeah, for maybe one game in July, it probably is about the same. I mean, that's another sort of example of Bath. I just feel so sorry for the situation they find themselves in with Bruce Craig, and he's been for the last 15, however long, 10 years, campaigning to try and change the recreation ground into something which will create a huge buzz around the town, and bring in maybe sponsors from different areas and create that sort of identity again around the team. But he's just got the council just constantly fighting against him, and if you don't have local councils and authorities on your side, then nothing's ever going to get past it.
How did, as a matter of interest, how did Brian Ashton ever manage to coach you guys to play some pretty attractive rugby, and some quick rugby and quick thinking rugby and instinctive rugby on the record? Did he teach you to levitate or something? I don't know quite how he managed to do it, because as you know, he used to moan about that service more than anyone.
He did. Yeah. No, back we did have some great years of attacking rugby. We created this sort of this identity of attacking from anywhere, but like with any team, when you have great players around you, it makes things a lot easier, doesn't it? So we had some fantastic players in Butch James, Michael Claessens, Ollie Barkley.
Was Ollie Barkley there?
He was really good, wasn't he, Ollie?
Yeah, he was our top player. Well, it must be one of your favourites. He must be one of the best players you ever played with.
Yeah, 100%. So I mean, we had an outstanding team then.
Nick, just before you go, I'm going to put you on the spot very, very quickly. Could I get, obviously you mentioned Freddie Stewart and your admiration for him. I'd love to hear your starting back three for England if the World Cup final was tomorrow and somehow England were in it.
Yeah, I mean, Freddie Stewart would definitely be at fullback. I like Arundel. Yeah, I just like I like what he can bring in terms of an attacking sense with his speed. And on the other wing, I still love Noel as well. I think he's a great player as well. So I'd probably go those. Actually no, I'd get obviously Anthony Watson in there.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to press you for someone other. Knowles ruled himself out of the World Cup. I think you may have seen. So I was going to press you for someone other than him, and I thought it might be Anthony Watson. Yeah, awesome. Chris, did you say Ollie Barkley?
Yeah. Well, in fact, he's in all three positions.
He's that talented. He's just one of the best players.
He is. He's one of the best players I've ever seen.
Oh dear. Right, Nick. Thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, enjoy the rest of the time in the UK. And yeah, all the best with the early stages of Bayonne. I hope it all goes well out there. And yeah, it's been great talking to you.
Thanks a lot for having me on there. It's been enjoyable to go down memory lane.
Thanks, Nick. That was great. That was good fun. Thank you.
Good luck down in Bayonne.
Awesome, Nick. Take care.
Thanks.
A slight change of tone now, as this Rugby Paper was devastated by some very sad news at the weekend, as we learned of the passing of the founder and editor-in-chief of the Rugby Paper, David Emery. David founded the Rugby Paper in 2008, and it quickly became the #1 rugby newspaper in the country. And fair to say the Rugby Paper and its future owes its entirety to him. I'm not lucky enough to say that I knew him particularly well, because I only joined the Rugby Paper a year and a bit ago. So Nick, I'll sort of hand over to you on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I worked with David. Had the idea for the Rugby Paper, and the Rugby Paper exists purely because of his vision for it, and the tenacity with which he brought to everything that he did, and the savvy that he brought to it as well, is what got the Rugby Paper up and running. I joined it at the outset, and had the privilege of working with him from that point. And at the beginning, obviously, you know, any startup is vulnerable. There was no big sponsor or anything else of the sort behind the Rugby Paper, and David made it clear from the outset that it would have to wash its face in terms of sales in order to survive. And he didn't make, you know, any sort of grand predictions. He said we'll see how it goes for 6 months, and so on. And it got up and running. But the thing that really got the Rugby Paper moving in terms of circulation was probably the 2009 Lions tour. So that was we started in the September of 2008, and the 2009 Lions tour was 6-7 months later. So that, you know, gave, as Lions tours do, that gave the paper real traction, and it's gone from there. But the vision was David's, and the ability to juggle all the aspects of not only being a great editor, because he's, you know, I mean, I mentioned, you know, in terms of encouragement for young journalists and older journalists such as myself and so on, you know, he had a calm head and a very clear message all of the time. And the Rugby Paper, you know, went you know, from strength to strength, really. And his ability to be able to juggle all the balls that were associated with not only dealing with print, but also, you know, with journalists, with distribution, with running not only the Rugby Paper, but the non-league football paper, and so on. You know, he was a remarkable man in terms of his ability to keep all that turning over successfully.
It really was all that as well, Brendan, wasn't it? Because Nick mentioned the non-league football paper, there's the league paper, the cricket paper, and then the Rugby Paper as well. And that's added to the fact that he's been an editor-in-chief of some sort, because he was at the Daily Express beforehand for 40-odd years or something.
He was an absolute Fleet Street legend before he almost took up this in what he laughably called retirement. I mean, you know, he ran an absolute powerhouse of a sports desk at the Daily Express when it could have some reasonable claim to be the best paper in the world. He was a remarkable character. He was in one way he was tabloid to his boots. He loved screaming headlines. He liked breaking stories. He liked ruffling feathers. He stood by his reporters who did that. But he also had this remarkable sort of broadsheet appreciation of, he wanted definitive match reports. He wanted stats. He wanted long reads. He wanted features. He wanted nostalgia. He wanted to cover schools, students, women's, varsity, everything. So, he really was a sports enthusiast. I never knew what his favourite sport was. I don't know if it's football, cricket, rugby, racing. I got no idea. He just loved it all. And he made a very good stab at producing Britain's really equivalent of L'Equipe or La Gazzetta with First Sport. Or was it Sport First? I always forget. And like all these things, in the end, that didn't quite take off because Britain is so horribly devoted to football that it's very, very difficult to actually run a commercially successful all sports newspaper or magazine. But he came closer than most. So he's a remarkable bloke, and he carried all that experience, all that overall knowledge and love of everything into his little empire of specialist sports papers, of which I think the Rugby Paper and the non-league football paper were his pride and joy.
Chris, anything to add to that?
Well, look, Nick and Brendan have been associated with the Rugby Paper for far longer than me. Thank the Lord, I hear the readership say. But it's I would try to paint his achievement on a broader canvas. Really, I mean, they said everything that reasonably needs saying, I think, about his achievement with the Rugby Paper. But he's made a wonderfully brave and defiant stand on behalf of print journalism, which is had inevitable in many ways with online and the internet world, stuff that we saw coming, but maybe some of us of a certain age didn't quite see how quickly it would take everything over. But it sort of didn't take the Rugby Paper over. I know we haven't, an online presence, and so we should. But he had a tremendous commitment to physical print journalism, a publication that you could go and buy in the newsagent and sit down and read, knowing that, it had a start, a middle, and an end. You might say, well, that's a bit of a throwback. It's a blast from the past, or it's just an exercise in nostalgia. But I actually think it's more than that. I think that the Rugby Paper has done pretty well for itself by the standards of startups, as Nick was saying earlier. It's a difficult trick to pull off. And I think insofar as that trick could be pulled off in the internet age, David did it. And it's an astonishing effort. And it's a hell of a lot more to do with him than it is to do with us lot, really, because he was the guy who decided, it could be done, that he wanted to do it, that he saw a future for it, and that if there was enough enthusiasm and energy and expertise behind it, it might be able to, as Nick says, wash its face in an age where most print publications are covered in mud and not looking too good. And for that alone, leaving aside that he was a really good bloke who knew his sport, loved it all, knew a lot about everything, but enjoyed talking to people who he felt might know different things to him. He was always open to new ideas, all that stuff. So leaving aside the personal great bloke that he was, I have to say that in this day and age, what he achieved with these projects has been magnificent. And I thank him for it, for sure.
Yeah, it's I think speak for us all to say it was a real privilege, an absolute privilege to work with him.
If I could actually jump in there, weirdly enough, obviously, like I say, I don't know him anywhere near as well as you guys do. But Chris, you mentioned the openness to new ideas. This whole podcast came from, it was January 2021, and I turned up at the Rugby Paper. I'd been in brief contact with David just to say, just to say, here I am, I'll do some work for you guys. And I wanted to show up with this idea of a podcast for the Rugby Paper because I knew the Rugby Paper didn't have one. David had no idea. He thought I was showing up to do some just freelance, go to matches, write reports, etc. And he didn't know anything about me or my podcasting experience, ability, or anything like that. And I just put forward the idea of a podcast. And almost straight away, he was on board. And I was, in the space of a very quick half an hour, all of a sudden, the Rugby Paper had a podcast. And you guys didn't know that, but it was almost like David, the king of rolling dice, snapped his fingers. And there it was that the Rugby Paper had a podcast. Brendan, you're laughing. You didn't know that, did you?
No, I knew nothing about it until I got an email.
Sorry,
Ollie Little, and he said, "Do you want to do a podcast?"
Is this a podcast?
Your face is on YouTube, Chewy, for the world to see.
Oh, well, no, I never go on there for fear of seeing something I don't want to see.
Is that in reference to the comment section or your own face?
No, I never read fan mail. It's rubbish. It's just so narcissistic.
Especially when you write it yourself.
And also I only have so many friends that I can ask to write this stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, if listeners, readers of the Rugby Paper have any memories, stories about David, do get in touch on Twitter or Instagram or by email. It's always great to hear those sorts of examples of how he touched people's lives. And obviously it goes without saying that a wholehearted thank you to David. We offer our condolences to his family and to his loved ones, and we can pledge to continue his phenomenal work in the form of the Rugby Paper in his honour.